Blood pooled beneath the Alpha King's body, spreading across the cabin floor in dark, shimmering ribbons. The poison was already turning his veins black. Alara Voss stood frozen, her healer's hands trembling. 5 years ago, this man's wolves had torn through her village, leaving nothing but ash and screams. Now he lay dying at her feet, and her 6-year-old daughter was watching. "Mama, why does he have the same mark as you?" Mira whispered, pointing to the crescent scar on the king's throat. The same scar Alara had carried since the night everything burned. Welcome to a story of vengeance, survival, and a bond that refused to die. Stay until the end. You won't believe what happens next. Drop a like and tell us what city you're watching from. The storm hit the frontier settlement just after midnight, rattling the shutters of Alara Voss's cabin with fists of wind and rain. She was used to storms. Out here, on the ragged edge of the kingdom, where the wilderness pressed close and civilization felt like a distant memory, you learned to sleep through anything. But this storm brought something worse than thunder. It brought wolves. Alara jerked awake to the sound of boots pounding on her porch, followed by a crash as her door splintered inward. She was on her feet instantly, a knife already in her hand, heart hammering as 3 figures stumbled into her home. 2 were warriors in mud-splattered armor, their faces grim and desperate. Between them, they dragged a 3rd man, larger, darker, his head lolling forward, and bleeding. Bleeding everywhere. "Healer!" one of the warriors barked. "We need a healer now!" Alara's breath caught. Her cabin was small, barely more than 2 rooms, but everyone within 50 miles knew she had the skill. She'd patched up farmers, delivered babies, treated infections that would have killed anyone without her knowledge of the old remedies. But this? "Get out," she said, voice flat and cold. The warrior's eyes widened. "What?" "I said get out. I don't treat soldiers, not his soldiers." Because now she could see the insignia on their armor, the silver wolf's head, the mark of the crown's elite guard. And the man between them, though his face was half hidden by blood and matted black hair, wore a cloak edged in midnight blue, the king's color. The second warrior stepped forward, desperation cracking his voice. "The Alpha King is dying. That blade was poisoned. If you don't help him, then he dies," Alara interrupted, her knuckles white around the knife hilt. "Just like my husband died, just like half my village died when his wolves came through 5 years ago." The room went silent except for the rasping, labored breathing of the wounded man. Then a small voice broke the tension. "Mama?" Alara's heart dropped. She spun to see Mira standing in the doorway of the back room, her daughter's wide brown eyes fixed on the strangers, on the blood spreading across the floorboards. 6 years old, and already she'd seen too much hardship. Alara had sworn to protect her from this world's cruelty. "Mira, go back to bed," Alara said, gentler now. But Mira didn't move. She was staring at the wounded man with an expression Alara couldn't quite read. Not fear, but something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. The first warrior's hand drifted toward his sword. "We don't have time for this. You're the only healer within 20 miles. If the king dies here, on your floor, there will be consequences." "You threaten me in my own home?" Alara's voice dropped to a snarl. "You bring that monster here and expect mercy?" "I expect you to remember your oath," the warrior snapped back. "You're a healer. You don't get to pick and choose." Alara's jaw clenched. She wanted to scream at them, to throw them out into the storm, to let the great Alpha King Kalen bleed out on her floor, and finally balance the scales of justice. But Mira was watching, and despite everything, despite the rage that lived like hot coals in her chest, Alara had never let someone die when she could save them, not even him. "Fine," she bit out. "Put him on the table. Move!" The warriors hauled the king's body onto her rough-hewn work table, sending her jars of dried herbs clattering. Up close, Alara could see the wound, a deep gash across his ribs, the edges already blackening. Poison, fast-acting from the look of it. She'd seen this before. Nightsbane venom, probably. It attacked the blood, turned it toxic, shut down the organs one by one. Without an antidote, he had maybe an hour. "Hold him down," she ordered, grabbing supplies from her shelves. "This is going to hurt." Kalen's eyes fluttered open for the first time, pale gray, like winter ice, unfocused, but aware. They locked onto Alara's face, and for a heartbeat she saw something flicker there. Confusion, pain, recognition? No. Impossible. She pushed the thought away and got to work. The next 30 minutes were a blur of controlled chaos. Alara cut away the king's shirt, exposing the wound and the frighteningly dark veins spiderwebbing outward from it. She packed the gash with a poultice of silver leaf and ground bone root, then forced a tincture of activated charcoal and moon petal down his throat to bind the toxins in his blood. He fought her, weakly, instinctively, and the warriors had to pin his shoulders. "Stop moving or you'll die faster," Alara hissed at him. Kaelin's eyes found hers again, clearer now, and she felt an odd jolt run through her. There was something about his gaze, intense, penetrating, as if he were trying to see past her skin into her very bones. "You," he rasped, voice barely audible. "Save your strength," Alara snapped, focusing on suturing the wound. Her hands moved with practiced precision, but inside she was shaking. This close, she could smell him, pine and smoke, and something wild, something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. This was the man who'd led the wolves that destroyed her life. The Alpha King, ruler of the northern packs, whose feral soldiers had swept through her village 5 years ago in a blur of claws and fire. They'd been hunting rebels, they'd said afterward, rooting out insurgents. They'd killed innocents, women, children. Her husband, Dane, had died trying to protect their neighbors. And she was saving this man's life. The irony tasted like ash. "Mama, why does he have the same mark as you?" Alara's hands froze mid-stitch. She looked up to find Mira had crept closer, standing right beside the table now, her small finger pointing at Kaelin's throat. There, just below his jaw, was a crescent-shaped scar, pale and old, barely visible against his tanned skin, exactly like the one Alara had. Her breath caught. Slowly, she lifted her own hand to her throat, where beneath her collar lay an identical mark, a scar she'd woken with 5 years ago, the morning after the massacre, with no memory of how she'd gotten it. "Mira, step back," Alara said quietly. But Kaelin's eyes had sharpened. Despite his injuries, despite the poison still coursing through him, his gaze moved from Alara's face to her throat to Mira, standing there in her too big nightshirt with her dark curls tangled from sleep. His expression shifted. Shock. Disbelief. "How old is she?" he whispered. Alara's hands clenched. "That's none of your concern. How old?" The warrior beside him put a hand on his king's shoulder. "Sire, you need to rest." "6," Alara said coldly. "She just turned 6, and before you ask, yes, she was conceived during the massacre. The night your wolves destroyed everything I loved." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kaelin stared at Mira as if he'd seen a ghost. The little girl stared back, fearless in the way only children could be, her head tilted slightly. "You look sad," Mira said to him. "Does it hurt a lot?" "Mira, go to your room, now." This time, Alara's tone brooked no argument. Mira's face fell, but she obeyed, casting one last curious glance at the wounded king before disappearing into the back room. Alara finished the sutures in tense silence, then wrapped the king's torso in clean bandages. The poison was neutralized, barely, but he'd need rest and careful monitoring for the next few days. The antidote would take time to fully purge the venom from his system. "He'll live," she said flatly, wiping blood from her hands. "Keep the wound clean. Change the dressing twice a day. If the veins start turning black again, burn silverleaf and make him breathe the smoke." The warrior, who'd threatened her earlier, now looked almost sheepish. "Thank you, the kingdom is in your debt." "I don't want the kingdom's debt," Alara said. "I want you gone by sunrise." But Kaelin's hand shot out, surprisingly fast, and caught her wrist. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. "Wait," Alara tried to pull away. "Let go of me." "That scar," he said, his voice gaining strength. "How did you get it?" "I don't know. I woke up with it. The morning after your wolves burned my village to the ground." Something flickered across his face. Was it guilt? Regret? She couldn't tell. "I have gaps," he said slowly, "in my memory. From that night, my wolf went feral. I remember blood, fire, screaming, and then," he paused, his jaw tightening, "a song. Someone singing. It pulled me back. Elara went very still. She remembered singing, remembered hiding in the burning remains of the healer's temple, clutching something, someone, and singing the old wolf-calming song her grandmother had taught her, the one that was supposed to soothe wild beasts. She thought it was a dream, a trauma-induced hallucination. "It was you," Kalen whispered, his eyes widening. "You saved me. You brought me back from the madness." "I saved no one that night," Elara said bitterly, finally wrenching her hand free. "I hid like a coward while people died." "You saved me," he repeated, and now there was something almost pleading in his voice. "And if that child is 6 years old, if she was conceived that night, if she has my eyes—" "Don't," Elara warned. "I need to know. You need to leave." But even as she said it, she felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Because Mira did have unusual eyes, pale gray, so light they almost seemed to glow in certain light. Elara had always assumed she'd inherited them from some distant relative, some trick of genetics. But looking at Kalen now, seeing those same eyes staring back at her. "I want a bloodline test," Kalen said, struggling to sit up despite the warrior's protests. "If there's even a chance—" "There's no chance," Elara said firmly. "I don't know what happened that night. I don't remember most of it, but I know I would never willingly—" "I'm not accusing you of anything," Kalen interrupted. His voice softened. "But wolves, when we're feral, when we're lost to the madness, sometimes we form bonds we don't remember. Primal bonds. They're rare, but they happen. And if you sang to me, if you pulled me back, if we—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "It would explain the scars, the matching marks. It's a sign of a mate bond." The room spun. "No," Elara said. "Absolutely not. The test will prove it one way or another. I don't care what some test says. You're not her father. You can't be." But doubt had already crept in, cold and insidious. Because Mira had always been different, stronger than other children her age, faster. Her senses were sharper. She could hear things Elara couldn't, smell storms coming hours before they arrived. And those eyes. "Come to the fortress," Kalen said. "Both of you, as my guests. I'll have the royal healers perform the test. If I'm wrong, you'll be compensated for your time and trouble. If I'm right—" "If you're right, nothing changes," Elara said. "She's my daughter, mine, and I will never let you take her from me." Kalen's expression softened in a way that surprised her. "I would never take a child from her mother. But if she's mine, she deserves to know. She deserves the protection of the crown, the education, the future that comes with being a royal heir. She has a future. Here. With me." "In a frontier cabin, barely scraping by?" One of the warriors spoke up, then flinched when Elara's glare turned on him. "I only mean—" "I know what you mean," Elara said coldly. "And I choose this life. Mira and I don't need your gold or your castles." "But you might need protection," Kalen said quietly. "If word spreads that I was here, that you saved my life, there will be those who see you as a traitor to the frontier settlements. And if Mira truly is my daughter, there will be those in the court who see her as a threat." Elara's blood ran cold. She hadn't thought of that. The frontier had long memories and little love for the crown. If people found out she'd helped the king, and if Kalen was right about Mira, if she really was his daughter, then she'd be a target for every ambitious noble and would-be usurper in the kingdom. "This is insane," Elara muttered, pressing her hands to her temples. "This whole night is insane." "Come to the fortress," Kalen repeated. "Stay as my royal healer. You and Mira will have rooms, protection, respect, and we'll have the test done, quietly. No one needs to know until we're certain." "And if I refuse?" Kalen's jaw tightened. "Then I'll respect your choice, but I'll also station guards nearby, because if there's even a chance that child is mine, I won't leave her unprotected." It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't exactly a choice either. Elara looked toward the back room where Mira slept, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around her. Everything in Elara screamed to refuse, to send these men away and pretend this night had never happened. But she was a mother before she was anything else. And Kalen was right about one thing. If this got out, if people started asking questions, Mira would be in danger. 1 week, Alara said finally. We'll come for 1 week. You'll do your test, and when it comes back negative, you'll leave us alone. Forever. Kalen nodded slowly. Agreed. But even as he said it, Alara saw the certainty in his eyes. He already knew. Somehow, he knew. And deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, Alara feared he might be right. The next morning dawned gray and cold. Alara packed quickly, taking only what they'd need for a week: clothes, Mira's favorite wooden doll, a few essential herbs. She told herself this was temporary, a precaution, nothing more. Mira was thrilled by the idea of visiting the fortress. She'd never been beyond the settlement, never seen the great stone walls or the sprawling city that surrounded the Alpha King's seat of power. Will there be other children? Mira asked, bouncing on her toes as Alara braided her hair. I don't know, sweetheart. Will we see the king again? He seemed nice, sad but nice. Alara's hands paused. Nice isn't the word I'd use. He has the same mark as you, Mama. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, Alara said, perhaps too quickly. Sometimes people just have similar scars. But Mira was looking at her with those two knowing eyes, and Alara had to look away. The journey to the fortress took 2 days by wagon. Kalen rode alongside them for the first day, still recovering but refusing to show weakness. His warriors formed a protective circle around the wagon, watchful and tense. Alara barely spoke to him. What was there to say? But she caught him watching Mira sometimes, his expression unreadable. And once, when they stopped to water the horses, she saw him crouch down to Mira's level and offer her a piece of honeyed bread from his pack. Thank you, Mira said, her smile bright. Are you feeling better? Mama's a really good healer. She is, Kalen agreed, his voice gentle. The best I've ever met. She saved you. That means you owe her a life debt, right? That's what the stories say. Kalen's lips quirked into something that might have been a smile. That's exactly right. Which means I'm in your mother's service now. If she ever needs anything, I'm bound to help her. Mira's eyes went wide. Really? Can you help us fix the roof? It leaks when it rains. This time Kalen did smile, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. I think I can manage that. Alara watched this exchange from a distance, her heart twisting. She didn't want Mira to like him, didn't want her daughter forming any attachment to this man, this king, this stranger who might upend their entire lives. But Mira had always been drawn to wounded things. Birds with broken wings, stray cats, lost travelers. She had her mother's healer's heart, and maybe, just maybe, her father's eyes. The fortress rose from the landscape like a sleeping giant, all dark stone and soaring towers. Alara had never seen anything like it. Even from a distance, it radiated power and permanence, a stark contrast to the rough wooden structures of the frontier. As they passed through the main gates, people stopped and stared. Whispers followed in their wake. Alara held Mira close, suddenly aware of how out of place they looked. Her in her simple homespun dress, Mira in her patched coat and scuffed boots. They were escorted to a suite of rooms in the east wing. Rooms, plural, with actual beds, not rope cots, with tapestries on the walls and rugs on the floors, and a bathing chamber that made Mira gasp with delight. Is this real? Mira whispered, running her hands over the soft bedding. It's real, Alara said, though she felt just as overwhelmed. But remember, we're only here for a week. A week. That was all. Just long enough to prove Kalen wrong and then return to their simple, safe life. But as she stood at the window, looking out over the sprawling fortress grounds, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be simple again. Chat. The bloodline test was scheduled for the following morning. Alara barely slept, her mind churning with worst-case scenarios. What if Kalen was right? What if Mira was his daughter? What would that mean for them? She was still wrestling with these thoughts when a knock came at the door. It was one of the king's advisors, a thin man with sharp eyes and a practiced smile. The Alpha King requests your presence in the healing wing. He wishes to discuss your role as royal healer. I haven't agreed to any role, Alara said. Nevertheless, he wishes to speak with you. Your daughter may remain here with her attendant. Alara didn't like the idea of leaving Mira, but the young woman who'd been assigned to watch over her seemed kind enough. and Mira was already distracted by a set of wooden toys someone had left in the room. Fine, Alara said. Lead the way. The healing wing was impressive, a long, airy space filled with light and the scent of medicinal herbs. Alara recognized some of the plants hanging from the rafters, but others were unfamiliar. Rare imports, probably. Things she'd never be able to afford on the frontier. Kalen was waiting for her in a private chamber, looking stronger than he had any right to after nearly dying 2 days ago. He'd bathed and changed into clean clothes, his black hair pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp angles of his features, and that damn scar on his throat. "You wanted to see me," Alara said, keeping her voice neutral. "I wanted to thank you," Kalen said. "Properly. Without an audience. You saved my life, even though you had every reason to let me die. I'm a healer. It's what I do. It's more than that. You chose mercy over vengeance. That takes strength." Alara's jaw tightened. "Don't mistake exhaustion for strength. I'm tired of death, tired of loss. If I'd let you die, I'd have become the thing I hate most about this world." Kalen studied her for a long moment. "You're not what I expected." "And what did you expect? Some simpering frontier girl grateful for your attention?" "No," he said quietly. "I expected anger, hatred. I expected you to curse my name with every breath. Instead, you saved me, agreed to come here, and you're still standing your ground. You're remarkable." Alara didn't know what to do with that. Compliments from the Alpha King felt like traps. "The test," she said, changing the subject. "How does it work?" "A simple blood ritual. The royal bloodline carries certain markers, magical signatures that can be detected by a trained seer. If Mira shares those markers, we'll know." "And if she doesn't?" "Then I'll honor my word. You'll be free to go, with my protection and my gratitude." Alara nodded stiffly. "Then let's get it over with." But before she could turn to leave, Kalen spoke again. "Alara, may I ask you something?" She paused. "What?" "That night, the massacre. Do you remember anything? Anything at all?" Alara closed her eyes. She'd tried so hard to forget, to bury those memories deep, where they couldn't hurt her anymore. But they were still there, lurking in the shadows of her mind. "I remember fire," she said finally, "screaming. I was in the healer's temple. I'd gone there to help the wounded. And then the wolves came. Your wolves. They were wrong. Feral. Not like normal shifters. They killed everyone they found." "I'm sorry," Kalen said, and he sounded like he meant it. "I lost control that night. My wolf took over and I couldn't—" He stopped, his fists clenching. "I've spent 5 years trying to understand what happened, trying to piece together the gaps in my memory." "You want absolution," Alara said bitterly. "You want me to tell you it wasn't your fault." "No. I want to understand how you survived, how you brought me back, because no one else could. My own pack couldn't reach me when I was lost to the feral madness, but you did." Alara met his eyes. "I sang, the old wolf-calming song. My grandmother taught it to me when I was young. I didn't think it would work, but I was desperate and—" She paused, the memory crystallizing. "You were standing over me. Your wolf. I thought you were going to kill me, so I sang. And you stopped. You changed back. You looked at me like you were seeing me for the first time." Kalen's breath hitched. "And then?" "I don't know. Everything went dark. When I woke up, it was morning. The village was destroyed. My husband was dead, and I had this scar." She touched her throat and saw Kalen mirror the gesture unconsciously. "A mate bond," he said softly, "formed in the heart of chaos. It's almost unheard of, but it's possible. When a wolf is feral, when they're on the edge of losing themselves completely, sometimes they'll bond with the one person who can anchor them. It's a survival instinct." "I don't want to be anyone's anchor," Alara said. "I don't want any of this." "I know, but the bond exists whether we want it or not. And if Mira—" He stopped, his expression softening. "If she's ours, then we'll have to figure out how to navigate this. Together." "There is no ours," Alara said firmly. "There's my daughter, my life. And you're an obligation I'm enduring for her safety." Kaelin nodded slowly, but she saw something flash in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or resignation. As you wish, he said. The test will be performed tomorrow at dawn. Until then, you and Mira are free to explore the fortress. Anything you need, just ask. Alara turned to leave, but paused at the door. Kaelin. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face at the use of his name. If the test is positive, Alara said quietly, if Mira is yours, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't try to change her. She's happy. She's kind. She doesn't need to be molded into some perfect royal heir. Let her be herself. Kaelin's expression softened. I promise. I've seen what happens when children are forced into roles they don't want. I won't do that to her, to our... He caught himself. To your daughter. Alara nodded and left before he could say anything else. That evening, as Alara put Mira to bed in their luxurious guest chambers, her daughter looked up at her with those two wise eyes. Mama, are you scared? Alara paused in the act of tucking the blankets around her. Why would you think that? You have your worried face, the one you get when you're trying not to let me see you're scared. Sometimes Alara forgot how perceptive her daughter was. I'm just uncertain about some things, but everything will be okay. I promise. Is it about the king? About the matching scars? Alara sighed. There was no point in lying. Yes. Tomorrow they're going to do a test to see if you and the king are related. Mira considered this. Would that be bad? It would be complicated. But he seems nice. Sad, but nice. And if he's my father, maybe I could help make him less sad. Alara's heart clenched. Sweetheart, it's not your job to fix sad people, even if he is your father. But you always say healers help people, and he looks like he needs help, not the medicine kind, the heart kind. Out of the mouths of children, Alara thought. You have such a good heart, Mira, but this is grown-up stuff. Let me worry about it, okay? Mira yawned and nodded, already drifting off. Within moments, she was asleep, her small face peaceful in the lamplight. Alara sat watching her for a long time, memorizing every detail. Because tomorrow, everything might change, and she had no idea if she was ready for it. Dawn came cold and gray, slipping through the tall windows of the guest chambers like an unwelcome visitor. Alara had barely slept, her mind churning through 1,000 scenarios, each worse than the last. Now she stood before the mirror, braiding her hair with fingers that trembled despite her best efforts to steady them. Behind her, Mira was already awake, humming softly as she played with the wooden horse one of the servants had brought yesterday. The child had no idea what was about to happen. No concept of how this single test could fracture their entire world. Mama, you're making the worried face again, Mira observed without looking up from her toy. Alara forced her expression to soften. Just thinking, sweetheart. About the test? There was no point in lying. Mira would see through it anyway. Yes. Will it hurt? No, they'll just need a small drop of your blood, like when you scraped your knee last month. Mira nodded, accepting this with the easy resilience of childhood. And then we'll know if the king is my papa? The word papa hit Alara like a fist to the chest. Mira had never had a father, had never asked for one. Dane had died before she was born, and Alara had raised her alone, determined to be enough. Then we'll know, Alara confirmed quietly. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was the same thin advisor from yesterday, his expression carefully neutral. The seer is ready. Please follow me. The testing chamber was deep in the fortress's oldest wing, down stone corridors that grew progressively darker and colder. The walls here were bare rock, ancient and unyielding, and Alara felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her with every step. Kaelin was already waiting when they arrived, standing beside an elderly woman whose silver hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall of moonlight. The seer's eyes were clouded with cataracts, but Alara had the unsettling feeling that she could see far more than any sighted person. This is Keeper Vessa, Kaelin said, his voice careful. She's performed bloodline tests for the royal family for 40 years. The old woman turned those clouded eyes toward Mira, and her wrinkled face broke into a smile. "Come here, little one. Let me see you." Mira looked to Alara for permission. At her mother's nod, she stepped forward with the fearless curiosity that defined her. Vesa knelt down, a feat impressive for someone her age, and took Mira's small hands in her gnarled ones. She was silent for a long moment, her head tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. "Oh," Vesa breathed. "Oh, child, you burn so bright." "Is that good?" Mira asked. "Very good, but also very unusual." The seer's clouded gaze shifted to Kaelin. "This will be illuminating, my king." Something in her tone made Alara's stomach clench. The old woman sounded almost excited, as if she'd discovered something rare and precious. The ritual itself was simple. Vesa pricked Mira's finger with a silver needle, letting 3 drops of blood fall into a crystal bowl filled with clear water. Then she did the same with Kaelin, adding his blood to the same vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. The blood swirled together, dark crimson against crystal clear. Then the water began to glow. It started as a faint shimmer, barely visible, but quickly intensified until the entire bowl was blazing with silver-white light. Patterns formed in the luminescence, intricate spirals and whirls that seemed to move with their own volition. "Impossible," Vesa whispered, leaning closer. "I've never seen a bond this strong, not in 40 years of testing." Alara's world tilted. "What does that mean?" The seer looked up at her, and despite the cloudiness of her eyes, Alara felt pinned by that gaze. "It means the child is undeniably his, but more than that, the bond between you and the king is still active, still alive. I can see it threaded through the girl's very essence, connecting all 3 of you." "That's not possible," Alara said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "There is no bond. I never agreed to any bond." "Bonds of this nature don't require agreement," Vesa said gently. "They form in moments of extreme duress when 2 souls recognize each other at the deepest level. Usually such bonds are forged intentionally, through ceremony and choice. But on rare occasions, when a wolf is feral and desperate, when death is imminent, the soul will reach out and grab hold of the nearest anchor. Any anchor." She gestured to the still glowing bowl. "This is what I see here. A bond born of desperation and survival. Unconventional, yes, but no less real." Kaelin was staring at the bowl as if it held all the answers to questions he'd been asking for 5 years. "The scar," he said quietly. "That's where the bond manifested, where our souls connected." "Precisely," Vesa confirmed. "A physical mark of a metaphysical reality." Alara felt like she couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. She'd come here expecting the test to prove Kaelin wrong, to let them return to their simple life on the frontier. Instead, the foundation of everything she'd believed for 6 years was crumbling beneath her feet. "Mama?" Mira's small voice cut through the chaos in Alara's mind. "Are you okay?" Alara looked down at her daughter, their daughter, and saw confusion mixed with concern in those pale gray eyes. Kaelin's eyes. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Alara lied, forcing herself to kneel and pull Mira into a hug. "Everything's fine." But over Mira's shoulder, she caught Kaelin's gaze and saw her own turmoil reflected back at her. Whatever this was, whatever they'd inadvertently created that night 5 years ago, it was anything but fine. The news spread through the fortress like wildfire. By noon, whispers followed Alara everywhere she went. The frontier healer, the king's forgotten mate, the woman who'd borne him a secret daughter. Some of the whispers were curious, most were hostile. Alara heard them as she walked through the corridors, pretending not to notice the servants who fell silent when she passed, or the nobles who watched her with barely concealed contempt. "Did you hear? Some peasant woman claiming the king fathered her bastard. She must have seduced him, probably used some frontier magic. Mark my words, she's after the crown. Why else would she appear now after all these years?" Alara kept her head high and her expression neutral, but each whisper was a knife between her ribs. She'd known this would be difficult, but she hadn't anticipated the sheer weight of the court's judgment. Worse were the stares Mira attracted. The child was blissfully unaware of the political implications, delighted by the fortress's gardens and the novelty of having other children to play with. But Alara saw how the noble children's parents pulled them away when Mira approached, saw the way servants bowed to her with stiff, resentful precision. Her daughter was being treated like a threat, like an interloper. By evening, Alara was ready to pack their things and leave, test results be damned. But Kalen found her before she could act on the impulse. "We need to talk," he said, appearing in the doorway of her chambers without preamble. "I have nothing to say to you." "Then listen." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I know the court is being hostile. I'm handling it." "Handling it?" Alara laughed bitterly. "Your nobles are treating my daughter like a disease, like something contaminating their precious bloodlines." "Our daughter," Kalen corrected quietly. "And they'll learn to accept her. I'll make sure of it." "Will you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just as trapped by this as I am. You're the king, but you can't even control your own people's opinions." Kalen's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't see the way they look at you at Mira? I've spent the last 6 hours in council meetings listening to advisors tell me I need to deny the test results, to claim Vesa was mistaken, to protect the integrity of the bloodline." He spat the last words like poison. Alara's anger faltered slightly. "What did you tell them?" "I told them Mira is my daughter, and anyone who questions that will answer to me personally." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "But the damage is done. There are factions forming already, nobles who see Mira as a threat to their own ambitions, others who see her as illegitimate, unworthy of recognition." "Then we'll leave. Tonight. Mira doesn't need this." "Neither do I." "You can't." Kalen's voice was urgent now. "If you run, they'll see it as proof that you're hiding something, that the bond is false, or that Mira isn't really mine. It'll make everything worse. And if we stay, then what? We spend the rest of our lives navigating court politics and dodging assassination attempts?" The words were meant sarcastically, but Kalen's expression turned grave. "Actually, yes. That's exactly what I'm worried about." The room went very quiet. "What are you saying?" Alara asked slowly. Kalen moved to the window, looking out over the fortress grounds. "My beta, Rathan. He's been acting strangely since I returned, asking questions about the bond, about Mira's legitimacy. He's ambitious, always has been, and he's not the only one. There are others in the court who'd prefer I had no heir at all, who'd see my death as an opportunity." "Are you saying someone tried to kill you?" Alara's mind raced back to the poisoned blade, the attack that had brought Kalen to her door. "That wasn't just random violence." "I don't know, but the timing is suspicious, and now, with Mira's existence revealed, the stakes are even higher." He turned to face her. "I'm not trying to trap you here, Alara. I'm trying to keep you both alive." Before Alara could respond, a scream shattered the evening quiet. They both moved instantly, Kalen reaching the door first and yanking it open. In the corridor, servants were running toward the commotion, their faces pale with fear. "The child," one of them gasped as Kalen grabbed her arm. "The king's daughter! Someone took her!" Alara's world stopped. "Where?" Kalen's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "The gardens. She was playing with the other children, and then she just vanished. No one saw." Alara didn't wait to hear the rest. She was already running, her healer's instincts giving way to pure maternal terror. Behind her, she heard Kalen shouting orders, his voice echoing through the stone corridors. The gardens were in chaos when she arrived. Children crying, parents clutching them close, guards searching the hedgerows with drawn weapons. "Mira!" Alara screamed, not caring who heard the panic in her voice. "Mira!" No answer. Kalen appeared at her side, his face transformed into something cold and feral. "Spread out," he commanded the guards. "Search every inch of the grounds. No one leaves the fortress until she's found." But it was Alara who found the first clue. A small wooden horse lying in the dirt near the garden wall. Mira's toy, the one she'd been playing with that morning. And beside it, a smear of blood. Alara's hand shook as she picked up the toy. The blood was fresh, still wet. Not much, maybe from a scrape or a small cut, but blood nonetheless. "Someone took her over the wall," Kalen said, his voice tight. He was examining the stone where fresh scratches marked the surface. "Recently, within the last 10 minutes. Who would do this? Elara demanded, fear giving way to rage. Who would take a child? Kaelin's expression was grim. Someone who wants to hurt me, or someone who sees Mira as a threat to their own power. He turned to his guards. Lock down the fortress, no one in or out, and get me Rathan, now. They found Rathan in the war room, poring over maps with several other high-ranking wolves. He looked up when Kaelin stormed in, surprise flickering across his handsome features. My king? Where were you 10 minutes ago? Kaelin's voice was barely controlled violence. Rathan's eyes narrowed. Here, planning next month's patrol routes. Why? Someone took my daughter. Someone with access to the fortress, knowledge of the grounds, and a reason to want her gone. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Rathan stood slowly, his posture deceptively relaxed. And you think that someone is me? You've been questioning her legitimacy since the test results came back. You've made your opinion on the bond quite clear. Having opinions isn't a crime, Kaelin. Rathan's use of the king's name without title was deliberate insubordination. And I've been here, with witnesses, for the last hour. The other wolves in the room nodded confirmation, though their expressions were uneasy. Kaelin's fists clenched. Then who? Perhaps, Rathan interrupted smoothly, you should ask yourself who else benefits from the child's disappearance. Who else might want to destabilize your rule by creating chaos and suspicion? Speak plainly. Rathan gestured to Elara, who'd followed Kaelin into the room. The healer appears at your door at a convenient moment, saves your life, produces a child she claims is yours. And now that child vanishes, creating the perfect opportunity for her to demand your protection, your resources, your attention. Isn't that a bit calculated? Elara felt the blood drain from her face. You think I staged my own daughter's kidnapping? I think it's an interesting coincidence. Enough, Kaelin snarled. Elara had nothing to do with this. How can you be sure? You barely know her. This bond you claim to share. It could be fabricated. A trick. Frontier healers know old magic, don't they? Magic that could fool even Vessa's tests? Rathan, I'm warning you. No, let him speak, Elara interrupted, her voice cold. I want to hear exactly what he's accusing me of. Rathan smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. I'm simply suggesting that we don't know you. We don't know your motives. And until we do, perhaps the king should be cautious about whom he trusts. The room had gone silent. Every wolf there was watching, waiting to see how this would play out. Kaelin stepped between Rathan and Elara, his body language a clear threat. Elara saved my life when she had every reason to let me die. She came here because I asked her to, not because she wanted anything from me. And right now, while we're standing here trading accusations, her daughter, my daughter, is out there, scared and alone and possibly hurt. So unless you have something useful to contribute, get out of my sight. Rathan held his gaze for a long moment, then inclined his head. As you wish, my king. But as he turned to leave, he paused. Although if I might make one observation, the girl's disappearance does raise an important question. If she truly is your heir, if this bond is legitimate, then why is she so vulnerable? True royal children carry the pack's protection in their blood. They can't be simply stolen away like common foundlings. He left before Kaelin could respond, but the damage was done. Elara saw doubt flicker across the faces of the other wolves in the room, saw them exchange glances that spoke volumes. They didn't believe Mira was legitimate, and now they were questioning whether she deserved to be found at all. The search continued through the night. Guards combed every corner of the fortress, every shadow in the surrounding woods. Tracking wolves were brought in, following scent trails that led nowhere. Elara refused to rest. She walked the grounds until her feet bled, calling Mira's name until her voice gave out. Kaelin stayed by her side, his presence a steady anchor even as her world spun out of control. We'll find her, he said for the 100th time. Will we? Elara's voice was raw. Your own beta thinks I staged this. How many others agree with him? How many of your wolves are even looking? All of them, because I ordered them to. Orders don't change hearts, Kaelin. Those people don't want Mira found. They want her gone. Then I'll tear this fortress apart stone by stone until she's safe. Elara turned to look at him, Really look at him. His face was haggard, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight with barely suppressed rage. But underneath the exhaustion, she saw genuine fear, not for his reputation or his throne, for Mira. "You really care about her," Alara said softly. "Don't you?" "She's my daughter," Kaylin said simply. "I didn't know she existed until 3 days ago, but yes, I care. More than I thought possible." Something in Alara's chest cracked. She'd spent so long hating this man, blaming him for every terrible thing that had happened. But looking at him now, seeing the desperation in his eyes that mirrored her own, maybe he wasn't the monster she'd built him up to be. "I'm sorry," she found herself saying, "for thinking you didn't care, for assuming the worst." Kaylin shook his head. "You had every right to assume the worst. I destroyed your life. I killed people you loved. The fact that you're even speaking to me is more than I deserve. You were feral. You didn't have control. That doesn't absolve me. I should have been stronger, should have found a way to—" He stopped, his entire body going rigid. "Wait, do you smell that?" Alara inhaled deeply. There, faint but unmistakable. The scent of smoke. Not wood smoke from the fortress hearths, but something sharper. More acrid. "The old tower," Kaylin said, already moving. "The abandoned one on the west wall." They ran through the darkness, Kaylin's superior speed putting him ahead until he remembered to slow for her. The tower loomed against the night sky, a crumbling relic from an earlier age. No one had used it in years, which made it the perfect place to hide someone. The door hung open, recently forced. Inside, a narrow staircase spiraled upward into darkness. Kaylin took the lead, moving with predatory silence, and Alara followed close behind. The smoke grew thicker as they climbed, and then Alara heard it, a small, frightened voice calling out, "Mama? Mira!" Alara pushed past Kaylin, racing up the final steps into a small circular room at the tower's peak. Mira was there, huddled in the corner, her hands bound with rough rope. Her face was tear-streaked, but she appeared otherwise unharmed. Relief crashed over Alara so powerfully she nearly collapsed. "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, thank—" She gathered Mira into her arms, working frantically at the ropes. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" "I'm okay, Mama. Just scared. There was a man. He said he was taking me somewhere safe, but then he left me here and locked the door and—" "It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe." Kaylin was at the window, his expression dark. "The smoke is coming from below. Someone set a fire in the lower chambers. This whole tower is going to collapse." As if to punctuate his words, the floor beneath them groaned ominously. "We need to leave. Now." Kaylin scooped Mira up, cradling her against his chest. "Follow me. Stay close." They descended as quickly as they dared, but the smoke was getting thicker, the heat more intense. Alara could hear the roar of flames below, could feel the structure shuddering with each gust of wind. They were halfway down when part of the staircase gave way. Kaylin reacted instantly, throwing himself and Mira against the wall as stone crumbled beneath them. The gap was wide, too wide to jump with Mira in his arms. "Go back up," Alara urged. "Find another way." "There is no other way. This is the only staircase." Kaylin's eyes were wild, calculating impossible odds. "I can make the jump, but not with both of you." "Then take Mira. I'll find—" "No." His voice was absolute. "I'm not leaving you." "Kaylin, don't be stupid. She's your daughter, your heir. If one of us has to—" "I said no!" The ferocity in his voice startled her. "You're both getting out of here, both of you." He shifted Mira in his arms, then extended his free hand to Alara. "When I jump, grab onto me. Hold tight and don't let go." "That's insane. You can't carry both of us and—" "Alara, do you trust me?" It was a ridiculous question. She barely knew him, had every reason to distrust him, but looking into his eyes, feeling the certainty radiating from him, "Yes," she heard herself say. "I trust you." Kaylin nodded once. "Then hold on." He backed up as far as the narrow landing allowed, then ran. At the edge, he launched himself into empty air. Mira clutched tight, and Alara's hand gripped in his. For a heart-stopping moment, they hung suspended. Then gravity took hold, pulling them down. Kalen's feet hit the far edge of the gap. He stumbled, nearly fell backward, but caught himself at the last second. Alara slammed into him from behind, and for a terrifying instant, they teetered on the brink. Then Kalen found his balance, pulling them both to safety, just as the section of stairs behind them collapsed completely. "Move!" he shouted, and they ran. They burst out of the tower just as the upper floors caved in, sending up a plume of smoke and ash. Alara pulled Mira close, coughing, her eyes streaming. Guards were rushing toward them, shouting questions she couldn't process. But she was alive. Mira was alive. They were safe. Kalen turned to her, soot-streaked and breathing hard. "Are you—" Alara kissed him. It was impulse, adrenaline, relief. She didn't know and didn't care. Her hands fisted in his shirt and she kissed him like her life depended on it, tasting smoke and fear and gratitude. For a shocked second, Kalen froze. Then he was kissing her back, one arm still holding Mira, while the other pulled Alara close. When they finally broke apart, Alara was shaking. Sorry. I don't know why Don't apologize, Kalen said roughly. His eyes were blazing with something that had nothing to do with the fire. Ever. A pointed cough interrupted them. Rathan stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "My king, I'm glad to see you found the child. Though I must say the circumstances are troubling." Kalen's hand tightened on Alara's shoulder. "What are you implying, Rathan?" "Simply that this seems to be a pattern. Danger follows wherever the healer goes. First the attack that brought her to us, now this. One might wonder if she's a target or a catalyst." "One might also wonder," Kalen said coldly, "why you're the first to arrive at every crisis. Where were you when the tower was burning, Rathan?" "Organizing the bucket brigade, as any responsible beta would." Rathan's smile was thin. "Unlike some, I take my duties seriously." The challenge in his words was unmistakable. Alara felt Kalen tense beside her, felt the violence coiling in his muscles. "Careful, Rathan," Kalen said softly. "You're very close to crossing a line." "Am I? Or am I simply the only one willing to ask the questions everyone else is thinking?" Rathan's gaze swept over the assembled guards, and Alara saw several of them nod in agreement. "This woman and her child have brought nothing but chaos to our pack. Perhaps it's time to consider whether their presence is worth the cost." "The only cost," Kalen growled, "will be paid by whoever orchestrated tonight's attack, and when I find them, they'll wish they'd never been born." He turned his back on Rathan, a deliberate insult, and guided Alara and Mira toward the fortress proper. But as they walked away, Alara glanced back. Rathan was watching them with cold, calculating eyes, and she realized with chilling clarity that they hadn't found an ally in the King's beta. They'd found an enemy. Rathan's cold gaze followed them all the way back to the fortress, and Alara felt it like a physical weight pressing between her shoulder blades. The beta made no move to follow, but he didn't need to. His words had already done their damage, planting seeds of doubt in fertile ground. Mira had fallen asleep against Kalen's shoulder, exhausted from terror and tears. The king carried her with surprising gentleness, his jaw set in a hard line that spoke of barely contained fury. Around them, guards formed a protective circle, but Alara noticed how some of them kept their distance, their expressions wary. They were afraid, not of external threats, but of her, of what she represented. "They think I'm cursed," Alara said quietly as they climbed the stairs to her chambers. Kalen didn't deny it. "They think you're a complication, something that disrupts the natural order." "And what do you think?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something flickered in those pale gray eyes. "I think you're the only honest thing in this entire fortress, and that terrifies them more than any curse." Inside the chambers, Kalen laid Mira gently on the bed. The child stirred but didn't wake, her small face still smudged with soot. Alara moved to clean her daughter's face with a damp cloth, her hands shaking with residual adrenaline. "Who did this?" she whispered. "Who took her?" "I don't know yet, but I will find out." Kalen's voice was quiet, deadly. "And when I do, you'll what? Execute them? That'll just prove Rathan right, that we're dangerous, that we bring violence wherever we go. I don't care what Rathan thinks, but you care what your pack thinks. And right now, they're listening to him, not you. Kalen's fists clenched. Then I'll make them listen. You can't force loyalty, Kalen. You can't command people to trust me, to accept Mira. That's not how this works. Then what do you suggest? That we just accept their hostility? Let them drive you away? Alara turned to face him fully. I suggest we find proof, real, undeniable proof that someone in this fortress is working against you. Because until we do, Rathan's going to keep sowing doubt, and eventually your wolves will have to choose between you and him. The truth of it hung heavy between them. Kalen ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. There has to be something we're missing. Some connection between the attack on me and tonight's fire. The poison, Alara said suddenly. The blade that struck you. Do you still have it? Kalen's eyes sharpened. It should be in the armory. Why? Because poisons leave traces. If I can examine the blade, I might be able to identify where it came from. Who made it? She paused. It's a long shot, but it's something. Then we'll look. Tomorrow when... No. Tonight. Now. Alara glanced at Mira's sleeping form. I'm not waiting for the next attack, not when my daughter's life is at stake. Kalen studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have someone watch Mira, someone I trust absolutely. He stepped into the corridor and returned moments later with a wolf Alara hadn't met before, a woman with iron-gray hair and scars crisscrossing her weathered face. This is Marin, Kalen said. She was my mother's personal guard. If anyone can protect Mira, it's her. Marin bowed her head. The child will be safe, my king. On my life. Alara wanted to protest, wanted to stay with Mira, but she forced herself to nod. Thank you. The armory was deep in the fortress's lower levels, a vast chamber filled with weapons of every description. Kalen led her to a locked vault in the back, producing a key from around his neck. Inside, among other confiscated weapons and dangerous artifacts, lay the blade that had nearly killed him. Alara lifted it carefully, holding it up to the lamplight. The edge was still discolored, traces of poison dried in the fuller. She sniffed it, touched her tongue to the residue, just barely, and her eyes widened. This isn't Nightsbane, she said. It's something else. Something I've only seen once before. Where? 5 years ago, during the massacre. Her hands trembled as memories surfaced. There was a wounded wolf in the healer's temple. Someone had poisoned him, used this exact compound. It's rare. You need shadowthorn root and crystallized viper's bile, both of which only grow in the deep frontier, weeks from here. Kalen's expression darkened. Someone from the frontier settlements is behind this? Or someone with deep frontier connections? Alara set the blade down. This wasn't some random attack, Kalen. Whoever poisoned you knew exactly what they were doing. They used a compound that mimics Nightsbane but is 10 times more lethal. If I hadn't treated you when I did, I'd be dead. Yes. They stood in silence, the implications settling over them like a shroud. Someone with frontier knowledge and resources wanted Kalen dead. Someone who'd planned this carefully, who'd waited for the perfect moment. Rathan spent 3 years stationed on the frontier, Kalen said slowly. Before he became my beta. He knows the territory, the plants, the people. That's not proof. No, but it's a connection. Kalen's jaw tightened. I need to search his quarters. That's a huge risk. If you're wrong, if he's innocent, you'll destroy any remaining trust between you. And if I'm right, I'll save both our lives. Alara wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because deep down she knew he was correct. They were running out of time, out of options. Someone in this fortress wanted them dead or gone, and they needed to know who before the next attack came. Then let's do it, she said, together. Rathan's quarters were in the officer's wing, spacious and well-appointed. The beta had gone to oversee the cleanup from the tower fire, giving them a narrow window of opportunity. Kalen picked the lock with practiced ease, a skill that surprised Alara until she remembered he'd spent years as a soldier before becoming king. They slipped inside, moving quickly and quietly. The rooms were immaculate, almost obsessively so. Every book aligned perfectly on the shelves, every surface dust-free. It was the dwelling of someone who valued control above all else. You searched the desk, Kaelin murmured. I'll check the bedroom. Alara moved to the large oak desk, carefully opening drawers and examining their contents. Requisition forms, patrol schedules, correspondence with other pack leaders. Nothing obviously incriminating, but then her fingers found a hidden compartment in the bottom drawer. Inside was a small leather journal, its pages filled with tight, meticulous handwriting. Alara's hand shook as she opened it, scanning the entries. Day 47. The king grows more reckless. His obsession with the frontier insurgents blinds him to the real threats within our own borders. Day 63. Secured the necessary components. The healer's formula is perfect, untraceable, swift. He'll never see it coming. Day 89. The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. Once he's gone, the pack will need strong leadership. They'll turn to me. They always do. Alara's breath caught. Kaelin, you need to see this. He emerged from the bedroom, his expression grim. I found something too. A hidden safe. It was full of gold, far more than any beta should have on a soldier's salary. Alara handed him the journal. She watched his face as he read, saw the color drain from it, saw fury and betrayal war for dominance. He's been planning this for months, Kaelin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Maybe years. The attack on me, the kidnapping, it's all here. He wanted to destabilize my rule, make me look weak. And then he stopped, flipping to a more recent entry. The healer complicates things, the child even more so. But complications can be eliminated. Another fire, perhaps. An unfortunate accident. The frontier woman and her bastard will vanish, and with them, any challenge to my claim. Rage exploded across Kaelin's features. His eyes flashed wolf gold, and for a moment Alara saw the feral creature that had destroyed her village. But this time, the fury was controlled, directed. I'm going to kill him, Kaelin said flatly. No. Alara grabbed his arm. If you kill him now, without witnesses, it'll look like murder, like you're eliminating a rival. We need to expose him publicly, make sure everyone sees what he's done. He tried to kill my daughter. I know, but if you act rashly, you'll play right into his hands. He wants you to look like a tyrant. Don't give him the satisfaction. Kaelin's chest heaved, wolf and man warring for control. Finally, he nodded. You're right. We do this properly. We call a pack council, present the evidence, let them see him for what he is. When? Tomorrow night. I'll summon every ranking member of the pack. Rathan won't be able to talk his way out of this. Alara wanted to believe him, but as they slipped out of Rathan's quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just lit a very short fuse. The next day dawned tense and brittle. Word of the pack council spread through the fortress like wildfire, and speculation ran rampant. Some thought Kaelin was going to officially recognize Mira as his heir. Others whispered that he was going to exile Alara and the child to appease the dissenting nobles. No one guessed the truth. Alara spent the morning with Mira, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but her daughter was too perceptive, too aware of the currents swirling around them. Are we in trouble, Mama? Mira asked as Alara braided her hair. No, sweetheart, but some people are. People who did bad things. Like the man who locked me in the tower? Yes, like him. Mira was quiet for a moment. The king seems sad. Is it because of the bad people? Alara's hand stilled. What makes you think he's sad? His eyes. They look like yours did after Papa Dane died, like there's a hole inside that won't fill up. The observation was so astute it made Alara's chest ache. You're very wise for 6 years old. Grandma Rose used to say I had an old soul. Mira turned to look at her mother. Do you think the king is my real papa? There was no point in lying anymore. Yes, I do. Does that mean we'll stay here? I don't know, baby. That depends on a lot of things. Do you want to stay? Alara opened her mouth to say no, to insist that they belonged on the frontier, in their simple cabin away from all this political intrigue. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, she didn't know what she wanted anymore. The pack council convened at sunset in the Great Hall, a cavernous space lined with ancient pillars and lit by massive iron chandeliers. Alara stood near the back with Mira, watching as wolves filed in, ranking soldiers, noble families, council members, all the people who held power in Kaelin's kingdom. Rathan entered last, his expression carefully neutral. If he suspected what was coming, he gave no sign. Kaelin stood at the head of the hall, commanding attention without saying a word. When he finally spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the vast space. I've called you here tonight to address a matter of grave importance, a betrayal that strikes at the very heart of our pack. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Rathan's eyes narrowed fractionally. 6 days ago, I was attacked on the frontier, poisoned with a rare compound and left to die. Only the skill of a healer saved my life. Kaelin's gaze found Alara across the room. That same healer, Alara Voss, and her daughter Mira have been targets of harassment and violence since arriving here. Last night, my daughter was kidnapped and nearly killed. The murmurs grew louder. Several wolves shot accusatory glances at Alara. I know what many of you think, Kaelin continued, that the healer brought this chaos with her, that she and the child are the source of our troubles. But you're wrong. He pulled out Rathan's journal, holding it high. The real threat has been among us all along. Someone who spent months, perhaps years, planning to seize power. Someone who orchestrated the attack on me, who kidnapped Mira, who's been systematically undermining my rule. Rathan stood slowly. My king, I don't know what lies you've been told, but these aren't lies, Rathan. They're your own words. Kaelin opened the journal, reading aloud. Once he's gone, the pack will need strong leadership. They'll turn to me. He looked up. Care to explain? The hall erupted, wolves shouting questions, demanding answers. Rathan's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. The journal is a forgery. Someone planted it to frame me. And the hidden safe full of gold? Kaelin challenged. The poison components we found in your quarters? Are those forgeries too? I've been investigating the attacks independently, Rathan said smoothly, addressing the crowd now instead of Kaelin. Of course I'd have evidence. I was gathering it to present to the king privately, to avoid causing panic. Some of the wolves nodded, their expressions uncertain. Rathan was playing his part perfectly, the loyal beta falsely accused by a paranoid king. You're lying, Kaelin snarled. Am I? Or are you so desperate to protect your frontier woman that you'll fabricate charges against your most trusted advisor? Rathan's voice rose, passionate and convincing. Think about it. The healer appears from nowhere, claims a bond no one can verify, produces a child of convenient age, and suddenly our king is willing to tear the pack apart to defend her. Who's really being manipulated here? The crowd's mood shifted. Alara felt it like a physical thing, the turning of the tide against them. The bond is real, Kaelin insisted. The seer confirmed it. Mira is my daughter. The seer is ancient and half-blind. Her tests can be fooled. Rathan spread his hands in a gesture of reasonableness. I'm not saying the healer is consciously malicious. Perhaps she truly believes the child is yours. But belief doesn't make it truth. We have your journal, your handwriting, which any skilled forger could replicate. My king, I've served you faithfully for 8 years. I've bled for this pack, fought for this pack. And now you accuse me of treason based on evidence that conveniently appeared in my quarters? Evidence that only you and the healer claim to have seen. Alara's stomach dropped. He was turning this around, making them look like the conspirators. I saw it too, Kaelin said, and I will swear to its authenticity before the entire pack. The word of a king blinded by a mate bond against that of his loyal beta. Rathan shook his head sadly. This is exactly what I feared. The healer has corrupted your judgment, made you see enemies where there are only friends. Enough! Kaelin's voice cracked like a whip. I am your king. You will— Are you? Rathan interrupted, and the hall went deathly silent. Because a true king puts his pack above personal desires. A true king doesn't destroy his most trusted allies to protect a woman he's known for less than a week. The challenge was unmistakable. Open rebellion, dressed up as concern. Kaelin's eyes flashed gold. You dare question my authority? I question your judgment, and I'm not alone. Rathan gestured to the assembled wolves. Look at their faces, Kaelin. They're confused, frightened. They don't know who to believe anymore. Is that the strong leadership our pack deserves? Several wolves were nodding now. Not many, but enough. Enough to show that Rathan's poison had spread farther than anyone realized. Alara's hands clenched. This was spiraling out of control. She had to do something, had to. I can prove it. Her voice cut through the tension, surprising even herself. Every eye in the hall turned to her. I can prove the bond is real, Alara said, stepping forward. Mira clutched at her skirt, but Alara gently disentangled her daughter's fingers and moved into the center of the hall. There's a ritual, an ancient one. If Kaelin and I truly share a mate bond, it will manifest physically, undeniably. Even Rathan won't be able to dispute it. Kaelin's expression was torn between hope and concern. Alara, that ritual is dangerous. If the bond isn't perfectly stable, then we'll find out, won't we? She met his gaze steadily. I'm tired of defending myself, tired of being called a liar. Let's end this, once and for all. Rathan's mask of concern slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. By all means, let the healer prove her claims. I, for one, am very interested to see the results. Because he didn't believe it would work, Alara realized. He thought she was bluffing, that the bond was a convenient fiction that would unravel under scrutiny. He was about to be very disappointed. Well, the ritual required privacy and preparation. The Pack Council was dismissed with instructions to reconvene in 1 hour. Alara was escorted to a ceremonial chamber deep in the fortress, a circular room carved entirely from white stone. Keeper Vesa was already there, along with 2 younger seers who would assist. The old woman's clouded eyes fixed on Alara with disturbing accuracy. You're certain about this, child? The bond manifestation ritual is not without risk. I'm certain, Alara said, though her heart was hammering. What do I need to do? Vesa explained the ritual in detail. It would require blood from both Alara and Kaelin, mixed in a sacred vessel and consumed by each of them. If a true mate bond existed, it would activate, becoming visible as matching marks on their bodies, marks that would glow with inner light for all to see. If the bond didn't exist, or if it was corrupted or incomplete, the ritual would fail, and failure could mean anything from mild discomfort to catastrophic magical backlash. There's one more thing, Vesa said quietly, so only Alara could hear. If the bond is real but dormant, activating it will change you. You'll feel everything he feels, and he'll feel everything you feel. Your souls will be intertwined in ways you can't imagine. There's no going back from that. Alara swallowed hard. And if I don't do this? Then Rathan wins, the pack will fracture, and you and your daughter will never be safe here. So really, there was no choice at all. Kaelin arrived moments later, his expression grim. Are you sure about this? No, Alara admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. He searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation. Finding only determination, he nodded. Then let's begin. They stood in the center of the white stone circle while Vesa prepared the vessel, an ancient silver bowl carved with runes that seemed to writhe in the lamplight. The old seer pricked Alara's finger first, then Kaelin's, letting their blood drip into the bowl where it swirled together in mesmerizing patterns. Vesa spoke words in a language Alara didn't recognize, her voice resonating with power that made the air itself vibrate. The blood in the bowl began to glow, soft at first, then brighter and brighter until it was almost painful to look at. Drink, Vesa commanded, offering the bowl to Alara. Alara lifted it to her lips. The blood was warm, tasting of copper and something else, something wild and electric that made her nerve endings sing. She drank half, then passed the bowl to Kaelin. He drank the rest without hesitation, his eyes never leaving hers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then pain exploded through Alara's chest, driving her to her knees. She heard Kaelin cry out, saw him fall beside her. It felt like something was tearing inside her, ripping apart and reknitting in a new configuration. And then suddenly, she could feel him. Not physically, but emotionally. His fear for her safety, his rage at Rathan's betrayal, his desperate hope that this would work, his soul-deep loneliness that echoed her own, all of it crashed into her consciousness like a tidal wave. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that he was feeling her too. Every wall she'd built, every defense she'd erected, stripped away in an instant. They were laid bare before each other, souls touching in ways bodies never could. Alara gasped, tears streaming down her face from the intensity of it. Across from her, Kalen's eyes had gone pure gold. Wolf and man merged completely. "Look," one of the young seers whispered in awe. Alara looked down at her hands and saw light blazing beneath her skin. Not reflected light, but internal radiance, as if her very blood had turned luminous. And on her throat, the crescent scar that had marked her for 5 years was glowing like captured moonlight. Kalen's scar blazed with identical light. But it didn't stop there. The light spread, tracing patterns across their skin, intricate, beautiful designs that matched perfectly. His right arm bore the same spiraling marks as her left. Her shoulder mirrored his. They were two halves of a single design, incomplete alone but perfect together. Vessa's voice trembled with something like reverence. "I have never seen a bond this strong. Not in 40 years of service. You two are—" She paused, searching for words. "You are meant, fated. The kind of bond that comes once in a generation." The glow slowly faded, but the marks remained, visible now, undeniable. Alara stared at her marked skin, her mind reeling. This was real. All of it was real. She looked up at Kalen and found him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Wonder, maybe, or terror, possibly both. "Everyone needs to see this," Vessa said. "Bring them back. Now." When the Pack Council reconvened, the sight of Alara and Kalen standing side by side, their matching marks glowing faintly in the torchlight, silenced every voice in the hall. "The bond is real," Vessa announced, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Witnessed and verified by 3 seers. No forgery, no deception. These two are bound by fate itself." The wolves stared, expressions ranging from shock to awe to, in some cases, anger. But no one could dispute what they were seeing. No one except Rathan. "A parlor trick," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Some frontier magic to create the illusion of—" "You want proof?" Kalen's voice was deadly calm. He reached out and took Alara's hand, and the moment their skin touched, the marks blazed brighter. The entire hall gasped. "This is the bond you claimed was false," Kalen continued. "The bond you said corrupted my judgment, but it's real, Rathan, just like your treachery is real, just like your lies are real." Rathan's mask finally cracked. Rage and hatred twisted his features. "You think this changes anything? You think some mystical bond makes her worthy of standing beside you? She's frontier trash, Kalen. A peasant, and that child is my daughter," Kalen said softly, dangerously. "My heir. And if you finish that sentence, I will tear your throat out here and now." The hall had gone deathly silent. Alara could feel the tension coiling tighter and tighter, ready to snap. And then Rathan laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound that raised the hair on Alara's neck. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I poisoned you. Yes, I took the child, because someone had to stop you from destroying everything our pack has built. You're weak, Kalen. Soft. You let emotions cloud your judgment, let pretty faces and sad stories sway your decisions. You're not fit to lead." "And you are?" Kalen's voice was ice. "I would have been. I would have been the king this pack deserves. Strong, ruthless, uncorrupted by sentimentality." Rathan's hand drifted toward his belt, where a dagger hung. "But you forced my hand. If I can't take the throne peacefully, I'll take it by force." He moved with supernatural speed, the dagger flashing toward Kalen's heart. But Alara was faster. She didn't think, didn't plan. The bond sang between them, and she knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't let him die. Her hand shot out, catching Rathan's wrist mid-strike. The dagger's tip stopped an inch from Kalen's chest. Rathan stared at her in shock. "How did you—" "The bond," Vessa breathed. "It's giving her his strength. His speed. They're sharing everything now." Alara wrenched Rathan's wrist sideways, forcing him to drop the dagger. But he recovered quickly, his other hand shooting out to grab her throat. Then Kalen was there, his fist connecting with Rathan's jaw with bone-breaking force. The beta stumbled backward, blood streaming from his mouth. "You dare attack them in my hall?" Kalen's voice had gone guttural, more wolf than man. "You dare?" I dare everything, Rathan spat blood on the white stone floor. Because I'm not alone, you fool. Did you really think I was working by myself? He raised his hand, and suddenly a dozen wolves in the crowd drew weapons. Alara's blood turned to ice. Not a dozen. More. 20 at least, scattered throughout the hall. All loyal to Rathan. All ready to kill. A coup? Kaelin said flatly. You planned a coup. I planned to save this pack from your incompetence. And I still can. Rathan wiped blood from his mouth, his smile vicious. Your loyal wolves are outnumbered 2-1. Surrender now, abdicate peacefully, and I'll let you and your pretty healer live out your days in exile. Resist, and I'll paint these walls with your blood. The hall erupted into chaos, wolves drawing weapons, choosing sides, the air thick with the promise of violence. Alara grabbed Mira, who'd been standing frozen near the back wall, and pulled her close. Her daughter's eyes were wide with terror. It's okay, baby, Alara whispered, though nothing was okay. Stay behind me. Don't move. Kaelin stood at the center of it all, weighing his options. Fight and risk everyone in this hall. Surrender and lose everything. Through the bond, Alara felt his anguish, felt him calculating the cost of each choice. There has to be another way, she said urgently. Kaelin, there has to... But her words were cut off by a sharp, burning pain in her side. She looked down to see crimson spreading across her dress. One of Rathan's wolves had thrown a knife, and it had found its mark. The world tilted. Alara's knees buckled, and she heard two voices screaming her name, Kaelin's and Mira's, overlapping in perfect horror. Then everything went dark. Pain exploded through Kaelin's chest, not his own, but Alara's, transmitted through the bond with devastating clarity. He felt the knife pierce her side as if it had struck him instead, felt her knees buckle, felt consciousness slipping away from her like water through grasping fingers. No! The word tore from his throat, raw and primal. He was beside her before the blade clattered to the floor, catching her as she fell. Blood soaked through her dress, warm and wet against his hands. Behind her, Mira was screaming, the sound high and terrible and utterly broken. Mama! Mama, wake up! Rathan's laughter cut through the chaos. How touching. The great Alpha King, brought to his knees by a dying peasant. This is exactly what I've been trying to prevent, weakness dressed up as love. Kaelin's vision went red. The wolf inside him howled for blood, for vengeance, for Rathan's throat between his teeth. But Alara's weight in his arms anchored him, kept him human. She's bleeding out, Vesa said urgently, kneeling beside them. The blade hit something vital. Without immediate treatment, then treat her, Kaelin snarled. I can't. Not here. Not in the middle of a battle. The old seer's clouded eyes found his. But you could. Through the bond. You could lend her your strength, your healing, keep her alive long enough to... Do it, Kaelin said immediately. Tell me how. Around them, the hall had erupted into violence. Rathan's rebels clashed with loyal wolves, steel ringing against steel, snarls and screams filling the air. But Kaelin blocked it all out, focusing entirely on the woman dying in his arms. You must open yourself completely to the bond, Vesa instructed, her hands already working to staunch Alara's bleeding. No barriers, no walls. Let your life force flow into her. But be warned, if you give too much, you'll both die. You must maintain the balance. I don't care about balance, just save her. Kaelin. Merrin appeared beside him, her sword dripping red. We're outnumbered. We need to retreat, regroup. I'm not leaving her. Then we'll all die here. Merrin grabbed his shoulder. My king, please. Let me carry her to safety. You can perform the ritual somewhere secure. She was right. Kaelin hated it, but she was right. He couldn't protect Alara and fight Rathan's forces simultaneously. The East Wing, he said, making the decision in a heartbeat. It's defensible. Gather anyone still loyal and fall back. We hold there. Merrin nodded sharply and began shouting orders. Loyal wolves formed a protective circle around Kaelin, Alara, and Mira as they fought their way toward the exit. Kaelin carried Alara himself, refusing to relinquish her to anyone else, while Vesa guided Mira through the chaos. A rebel wolf lunged at them, blade aimed at Mira's back. Kaelin couldn't move fast enough, not with Alara in his arms. But Mira turned, and something impossible happened. The child's eyes flashed gold, bright, brilliant gold, and the attacking wolf froze mid-strike. He dropped his weapon, confusion written across his face, and simply walked away as if he'd forgotten why he was there. "What?" Kaelin started. "Later," Vesa said urgently. "Move." They burst through the doors into the corridor beyond, and Marin's wolves immediately began barricading the entrance with furniture and anything else they could find. The sounds of battle faded to a dull roar behind thick oak and stone. "The healer's quarters," Vesa directed. "It has the herbs I'll need." Kaelin ran, his supernatural speed eating up the distance. Alara's blood soaked his shirt, and through the bond he felt her life force flickering like a candle in a storm. She was fading fast. Too fast. He kicked open the door to her chambers and laid her on the bed with a gentleness that contradicted his urgency. Her face was deathly pale, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Alara," he said, gripping her hand. "Stay with me. Please. Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain. "Mira? Is she—" "She's safe. Right here." Kaelin gestured, and Mira climbed onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, Mama. I'm okay." Alara's lips moved in what might have been a smile. Then her eyes closed again, and Kaelin felt her slipping further away. "Now," Vesa commanded. "You must do it now, or she's lost." Kaelin didn't hesitate. He placed his hands over Alara's wound, feeling the torn flesh beneath his palms, and opened himself to the bond completely. It was like diving into an ocean, vast, overwhelming, infinite. He felt Alara's consciousness, faint and drifting, and reached for it with everything he had. He poured his strength into her, his life force, his very essence. The bond between them blazed like the sun, and for a moment they weren't two separate beings, but one shared existence. He felt her pain as his own, felt the knife's damage as if it had struck his body. But he also felt her fierce determination, her refusal to leave Mira alone in this world, her warrior spirit that had survived so much already. "Fight," he sent through the bond. "Fight with me. For Mira. For us." And incredibly, impossibly, she answered. Her consciousness strengthened, reaching back toward his. Together they focused on the wound, on knitting torn flesh, on stopping the bleeding. Kaelin felt his own strength draining away, felt exhaustion creeping through his limbs, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. If she died, part of him would die with her. The bond had made that truth undeniable. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time lost all meaning. When Kaelin finally surfaced from the bond's depths, he was shaking with exhaustion, barely able to hold himself upright. But Alara's eyes were open, clear, alive. "You're insane," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You gave me too much. I can feel it. You're barely holding on." "Worth it," Kaelin managed, though black spots danced in his vision. Vesa was there, pressing a cup to his lips. "Drink. It's a strengthening tonic. You pushed yourself far beyond safe limits." Kaelin drank, the bitter liquid giving him just enough clarity to think. "The wound? Closed, healing cleanly, thanks to your intervention." The old seer's expression was grave. "But you can't do that again. The bond is powerful, but it's not infinite. Push it too far and you'll both burn out." "Then we'll have to end this before that becomes necessary." Kaelin forced himself to stand, though his legs threatened to give out. "Status report. How many did we lose?" Marin appeared in the doorway, her face grim. 12 dead, twice that wounded. We have perhaps 40 able fighters left. Rathan controls the Great Hall and the Armory. He's declared himself Alpha King and is offering amnesty to anyone who swears loyalty to him. "And our people?" "Holding. Barely. But Kaelin, we can't win this through force. His numbers are too great." Kaelin slammed his fist against the wall, frustration boiling over. "Then what do you suggest? That I surrender? Let him win?" "I suggest," Alara said from the bed, struggling to sit up despite Vesa's protests, "that we stop trying to fight him on his terms." Everyone turned to look at her. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, one hand pressed to her bandaged side. "Rathan's strength comes from the wolves who follow him," she continued. "Wolves who believe you're weak, that you've been corrupted by the bond. What if we showed them the truth? What if we proved that the bond makes you stronger, not weaker? How? Kalen demanded. Elara met his eyes steadily. The same way I saved you that night 5 years ago. With a song. With magic. With the proof that our bond isn't a weakness. It's the most powerful weapon we have. Kalen shook his head. I don't understand. The wolf calming song I sang during the massacre. It worked because of the bond, even though we didn't know it existed yet. My voice reached you when nothing else could. It pulled you back from the feral madness. She took a shaky breath. If I sing it now, with the bond fully activated, it should reach every wolf in this fortress. Show them what true strength looks like, what true leadership looks like. That's impossible, Marin said. Wolf calming songs only work on individuals, not entire packs. Unless the singer is bonded to an alpha king, Vesa interjected, her expression thoughtful. Then the magic could spread through the pack bonds, reaching every wolf tied to the king's bloodline. And Rathan's rebels? Kalen asked. They'll feel it too. They'll feel the truth of your bond, the strength of your connection. It won't force them to follow you. The magic doesn't work that way, but it will strip away the lies they've been told. Let them see clearly, perhaps for the first time. Kalen wanted to believe it could work, but he'd seen too much betrayal, too much ambition cloaked in righteousness. What if it's not enough? What if they choose Rathan anyway? Then at least they'll be choosing with full knowledge instead of deception. Elara stood, wavering slightly before Kalen steadied her. But I don't think they will. I think most of your wolves are good people who've been manipulated by a skilled liar. Give them the truth, and they'll return to you. Through the bond, Kalen felt her certainty, her faith in the basic goodness of people. It was naive, perhaps, but it was also beautiful. And maybe, just maybe, it was right. All right, he said. We do this, but not here. We need a central location where every wolf in the fortress can hear. The courtyard, Marin suggested. It's open, accessible from all the main wings. If you can get Rathan to meet you there. Oh, he'll meet us, Kalen said grimly. I'll make sure of it. The message was delivered by a young wolf barely old enough to serve, neutral, unthreatening, impossible for Rathan to refuse without looking like a coward. Meet me in the main courtyard at midnight. You and me, alpha to alpha. We settle this with claws and teeth the old way. Winner takes the throne. It was a challenge no alpha could refuse without losing face, and Rathan, for all his cunning, was still bound by the ancient laws of wolf hierarchy. He sent back a single word. Agreed. He'll try to kill you, Elara said, as Kalen prepared, strapping on light armor that wouldn't impede his movements. I know. And you're still going through with this? Do you have a better idea? When she didn't answer, he turned to face her. Elara, I need you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, if Rathan wins, don't. If he wins, you take Mira and you run. You go back to the frontier as far from here as possible. Change your names, hide, never come back. I'm not leaving you. You have to. For Mira's sake. Promise me. Alara's jaw set stubbornly. No, because you're not going to lose. We're going to walk into that courtyard together. We're going to sing the truth into every wolf's heart, and we're going to win. Together. The certainty in her voice made something warm unfurl in Kalen's chest. When had he started believing in her? When had her faith become his own? Together, he echoed, taking her hand. They walked to the courtyard side by side, with Vesa and Mira just behind them and Marin's loyal wolves forming a protective escort. The fortress was eerily quiet, as if the very stones were holding their breath. The courtyard was vast and open to the night sky, ringed by high walls from which hundreds of wolves watched with glowing eyes. They'd all come, loyal and rebel alike, drawn by the promise of witnessing history. Rathan waited in the center, flanked by his supporters. His armor gleamed in the moonlight, and a cruel smile played at his lips. Kalen, I'm almost disappointed. I thought you'd send an emissary, try to negotiate, but you're here to fight. Good. This will be quicker than I expected. I'm not here to fight, Kalen said calmly. I'm here to show you, to show everyone, what true strength looks like. He stepped forward, and Elara stepped with him. The matching marks on their skin began to glow softly, visible even in the darkness. Rathan's smile faltered. What trick is this? No trick, just truth. Kalen's voice carried across the courtyard, reaching every watching wolf. You said the bond made me weak, that caring for Alara and Mira corrupted my judgment. But you're wrong. The bond doesn't diminish strength, it multiplies it. Two souls working as one, supporting each other, fighting together. That's power you can't comprehend, Rathan, because you've never cared for anything beyond your own ambition. Pretty words won't save you, Rathan snarled. You had your chance to lead. You failed. Now step aside or be removed. Then let the pack decide, Alara said, her voice clear and strong despite her injuries. Let them see what we really are. Let them feel the truth. She began to sing. The melody was ancient, wordless, rising and falling like wind through trees. It was the same song she'd sung 5 years ago, the song that had saved Kalen from himself. But this time, amplified by the fully activated bond, it didn't stay contained to the courtyard. It spread. Through the pack bonds that connected every wolf to their alpha, through bloodlines and loyalties, the song rippled outward like light-piercing darkness. Alara's voice carried not just sound but emotion, memory, truth. Everyone listening felt what Kalen felt, his fierce protectiveness, his determination, his absolute conviction that protecting those he loved made him stronger, not weaker. They felt what Alara felt, her courage, her compassion, her refusal to be broken by trauma. They felt the bond itself, bright and pure and undeniable, and they felt what Rathan felt. That was the killing blow. Because while Alara's song revealed truth, it revealed all truth. And Rathan's soul was laid bare for every wolf to see. The ambition that curdled into cruelty, the envy disguised as concern, the willingness to kill innocents for power. The poison in his heart became visible for all to witness. Wolves began to turn away from him. One by one, then in groups, Rathan's supporters shifted their loyalty back to their true king. Some looked ashamed, others looked angry, at Rathan, at themselves, at being so thoroughly manipulated. No, Rathan said, his voice rising to a shout. No, they're using magic against you. Can't you see? This is exactly the corruption I warned you about. But no one was listening anymore. The truth had spoken, and it was louder than any lie. It's over, Rathan, Kalen said quietly. Stand down. For a moment, Kalen thought he might actually do it, might accept defeat with whatever dignity he had left. Then Rathan's hand shot to his belt, pulling a small vial of dark liquid. If I can't have the throne, he snarled, neither can you. He threw the vial directly at Alara. Time seemed to slow. Kalen saw the glass spinning through the air, saw the poisoned liquid inside, recognized it instantly as the same compound that had nearly killed him before. If it hit Alara, in her weakened state, she'd be dead before he could heal her again. He moved without thinking, throwing himself between Alara and the vial. Glass shattered against his chest, poison seeping through his shirt, burning like acid. And this time, there was too much of it, far too much. Kalen felt his legs give out, felt fire spreading through his veins. Through the bond, he felt Alara's terror, heard her screaming his name. The vial, he gasped, fighting to stay conscious. Get me the vial. Need to analyze. But even as Marin retrieved the shattered glass, Kalen knew it was too late. The poison was moving too fast, spreading too far. He'd bought them time, minutes maybe, but not enough, not nearly enough. Alara was on her knees beside him, her hands pressed to his chest, tears streaming down her face. No, 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 not like this. Not after everything. Alara, his voice was already fading. Take care of Mira. Be the queen they need. Shut up! She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. You don't get to give up. You hear me? I didn't survive your wolves destroying my village. Didn't endure 5 years alone. Didn't walk into this political nightmare, just to lose you now. Can't fight it. Then don't fight it alone. Her expression transformed, determination replacing grief. The bond. We use the bond. You gave me your strength earlier, now I give you mine. We share the poison, dilute it between both of us. No, Kalen tried to protest. We'll kill you too. Maybe. Or maybe we're both strong enough to survive together. What would kill us alone? She looked at Vesa. The ritual. How do I reverse what he did earlier? The old seer's eyes were wide. Child, that's never been done before. The theory exists, but tell me how. Bessa's hand shook as she reached for Alara's wrist. You open yourself to him completely. No barriers, no protection. You invite the poison into your own blood and trust that your bond is strong enough to neutralize it. But Alara, just tell me the words. Bessa did, her voice barely a whisper. Alara took Kaylin's hand in hers, their matching marks blazing with light. She spoke the ritual words, and Kaylin felt the bond open wider than it ever had before. Felt Alara reaching into his poisoned blood, pulling the toxin into herself, her healer's instincts guiding her even through the magic. The pain split between them. Kaylin gasped as the burning in his chest lessened slightly, but horror flooded him as he realized what was happening. She was taking the poison into her own body, sharing the burden, killing herself to save him. No! He tried to pull away, to close the bond, but Alara held tight. Trust me, she said, and through the bond he felt her plan crystallizing. I'm a healer. I know poisons. If I can get it into my blood, I can fight it. We can fight it together, but you have to trust me. You're insane, he whispered, echoing her earlier words. Worth it, she shot back with a pained smile. The poison flowed between them now, circulating through the bond. And something remarkable happened. As it passed through Alara's body, her healer's magic activated, breaking down the toxin, neutralizing it. Not completely, not fast enough to save them on its own, but it was working. And when the weakened poison circulated back through Kaylin, his alpha's supernatural healing kicked in, finishing what Alara had started. Back and forth the poison went, weakening each time, until finally, there was nothing left but a bad taste and fading pain. They collapsed together, both shaking with exhaustion, both covered in each other's blood and sweat. But alive. Miraculously, impossibly alive. The courtyard had gone utterly silent. Every wolf stood transfixed, having witnessed something that shouldn't have been possible. She saved him, someone whispered. She took the poison into herself and saved him. They saved each other, someone else corrected. Did you see? They fought it together, two halves of one whole. That's what a true bond looks like, Vesa said, her voice carrying across the courtyard. That's what a true king looks like. Not someone who rules through fear and deception, but someone who fights beside his people, who shares their burdens, who would die for them, and who they would die for in return. One by one, the wolves in the courtyard, even those who'd followed Rathan, dropped to one knee, acknowledging their king, acknowledging their queen, because that's what Alara had become, whether she'd wanted the title or not. Kaylin managed to sit up, pulling Alara against his chest. You're incredible, he murmured into her hair. Completely, utterly incredible. We're incredible, she corrected, her voice muffled against his shirt. Together. Through the bond, he felt her exhaustion, her relief, her budding joy that they'd actually survived. And underneath it all, something else, something warm and growing that he was afraid to name. What about him? Marin asked, gesturing to where Rathan stood frozen, his face ashen. The former beta looked around at his abandoned followers, at the wolves who'd turned their backs on him. Whatever he saw in their faces made something inside him break. I was supposed to save you, Rathan said, his voice hollow. I was supposed to protect this pack from weakness, from the mistakes that destroyed my father, my grandfather, every alpha in my bloodline who let emotions cloud their judgment, who chose hearts over heads and doomed their packs to ruin. He looked at Kaylin. I thought you were making the same mistakes. I thought I was preventing history from repeating. So you became the very thing you feared, Kaylin said quietly. You let fear make you cruel. Let ambition make you monstrous. What will you do with me? Rathan's hands hung at his sides, all fight gone. Execution? Exile? Kaylin looked at Alara. Through the bond, he felt her thoughts, her perspective. She'd lost so much to violence and revenge. She'd chosen mercy when she could have chosen hatred. Prison, Kaylin decided. You'll stand trial for your crimes. If you cooperate, if you give us the names of everyone who helped you, I'll argue for leniency. But Rathan, If you ever threaten my family again, mercy won't be an option. Guards stepped forward to take Rathen away. The former beta didn't resist, didn't speak, just walked away with his head bowed. As he disappeared into the fortress, Mira finally broke free from Vessa's protective hold and ran to her parents. Alara caught her daughter with her free arm, pulling her close while Kaelin wrapped around them both. "Is it over?" Mira asked, her voice small. "Are we safe now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Alara said, pressing a kiss to her daughter's hair. "We're safe." And for the first time since arriving at the fortress, Alara actually believed it. The courtyard remained hushed, wolves still kneeling, their faces upturned toward Kaelin and Alara like flowers seeking sunlight. But the silence wasn't empty. It thrummed with anticipation, with the collective held breath of a pack waiting to see what came next. Kaelin felt it through every bond that connected him to his people. Felt their confusion, their shame at having been so easily manipulated, their desperate hope that something good could still come from the ashes of betrayal. He tried to stand, to address them, but his legs refused to cooperate. The poison might be neutralized, but its effects lingered, leaving him weak as a newborn. Alara was in no better shape, trembling against him, her breathing labored. But when Mira tugged at her sleeve, whispering something Kaelin couldn't quite hear, she found the strength to smile. "Your people need you," Alara said softly, for his ears alone. "They need to hear from their king." "I can barely stand." "Then don't." She shifted, helping him settle into a more stable sitting position. "Speak to them from here. Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is show they're mortal, that they bleed and hurt and need help, just like everyone else." Through the bond, Kaelin felt the wisdom in her words, felt how much she'd learned about leadership through necessity, through years of holding her community together on the frontier despite having no official authority. She was right. She was so often right. "My people," Kaelin said, his voice carrying despite its weakness. "Tonight you witnessed something I never wanted you to see. Division, betrayal, brother turning against brother, and I take responsibility for that. I was so focused on external threats, on protecting our borders and maintaining our strength, that I didn't see the rot growing within our own walls." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Around the courtyard, wolves remained motionless, listening. Rathen was wrong about many things, but he was right about one. I have changed. The bond with Alara has changed me. It's made me see that true strength isn't about being invulnerable. It's about knowing when to ask for help, when to trust, when to choose mercy over vengeance. He looked at the kneeling wolves, meeting as many eyes as he could. "I'm not the king I was before, and I don't want to be." That king let fear dictate his choices, let the scars of past wars blind him to present needs. This king, the one sitting before you now, barely able to stand, this king chooses differently. Marin stepped forward, her voice rough with emotion. "My king, we failed you. We let Rathen's poison take root because we were afraid. Afraid of change, of outsiders, of anything that challenged the way things had always been. The failure is ours, not yours." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several wolves stood, their expressions stricken. "We were fools," one of them said, a grizzled veteran Kaelin recognized as one of Rathen's most vocal supporters. "We listened to his lies because they were easier than accepting the truth. That the world is changing. That holding on to old prejudices makes us weak, not strong." "I judged the healer without knowing her," another wolf admitted, shame coloring her words. "I called her unworthy based on where she came from, not who she was. And tonight she saved our king's life. Saved all our lives, really, by exposing the traitor in our midst." More voices joined in, confessions and apologies tumbling over each other. Alara's hand tightened in Kaelin's, and through the bond he felt her shock at this outpouring. She'd expected continued hostility, or at best grudging tolerance. This acceptance, genuine, heartfelt, seemed to overwhelm her. "I don't need your apologies," Alara said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying. "I need your trust. Not for my sake, but for Mira's. She's your princess now, whether any of us planned for it or not. And she deserves to grow up in a pack that values her, that sees her for the remarkable child she is, not as a political inconvenience." Vesa moved forward, one hand on Mira's shoulder. Speaking of the child, there's something you all need to know, something I witnessed during the tower fire. Every eye turned to the old seer. When the rebel wolf attacked her, Vesa continued, young Mira defended herself with magic. Wolf magic, specifically. An alpha's command. She stopped a grown warrior in his tracks with nothing but her will. The seer's clouded eyes seemed to see beyond the physical world. I've been testing bloodlines for 40 years, and I've never encountered a child with this much raw power. She's not just the king's daughter, she's something more, something unprecedented. Silence fell, heavy with implication. Then Marin laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that startled everyone. Of course she is. Look at her parents. A king who survived being feral, who carries the strongest alpha bloodline in generations, and a healer who can neutralize poisons with magic, who can sing truth into the hearts of hundreds simultaneously. Marin grinned at Mira. At that, you never stood a chance of being ordinary, little one. Mira ducked her head shyly, but Kaelin saw the small smile playing at her lips. His daughter, and wasn't that still a marvel, that word, was already showing signs of the powerful wolf she'd become. Their daughter, his and Alara's, born of chaos and trauma, but somehow perfect anyway. There's still the matter of succession, one of the elder council members said carefully. By law, an heir must be formally recognized before the full council. Given the unusual circumstances of the princess's birth, there may be those who challenge her legitimacy. Then let them, Kaelin said flatly. We have proof of the bond. We have Vesa's testimony. We have the evidence of tonight that Alara and I can literally share life force, that our bond is strong enough to defeat poison that should have killed us both. If that's not legitimate, I don't know what is. There is one other option, Vesa said slowly. A formal bonding ceremony, traditionally performed when mates choose each other, but it can also serve to ratify bonds that formed unconventionally. Kaelin felt Alara stiffen beside him. Through their connection, he sensed her conflicting emotions, desire warring with fear, hope tangled with doubt. We don't have to, he said quietly, just for her. The bond is already real. We don't need a ceremony to prove it. But it would help, Alara said. Wouldn't it? It would give Mira the legitimacy she needs. Give me a place here, a real place, not just as your convenient healer. You already have a place. You're my mate, my equal. The ceremony wouldn't change that. Maybe not for you, but for them? She gestured to the watching wolves. They need the ritual, the tradition, something that makes sense in their worldview. She was right again. Kaelin hated that she had to think this way, had to calculate political necessities instead of just following her heart. But she was right. Is that what you want? He asked. A formal ceremony? Alara looked at him, really looked at him, and through the bond he felt her fear dissolving. Felt her recognizing what had been growing between them these past chaotic days. Yes, she said simply. I want to choose you, consciously, deliberately. Not because a bond formed in trauma forces us together, but because I choose it. Because you're a good man, a good father, and someone I could... She stopped, swallowing hard. Someone I could love, if given the chance. Kaelin's heart stuttered. You barely know me. I know you jumped in front of poison to save me. I know you carried my daughter through fire and trusted me to save your life. I know what your soul looks like, Kaelin. The bond showed me, and I know I want to see where this goes, if you do. How was he supposed to respond to that? This woman who'd saved him, who'd fought beside him, who'd literally taken poison into her own blood to keep him alive. This woman who'd had every reason to hate him and chose mercy instead. I choose you, Kaelin said, his voice rough with emotion. I've been choosing you since the moment I woke up on your cabin floor and saw you standing over me with that defiant look in your eyes. I just didn't have the words for it yet. Mira made a small, happy sound. Does this mean you're getting married? Eventually, Alara said, a real smile breaking across her face. First, we have to do the wolf ceremony, then maybe a human one, for good measure. How does that sound? Can I be in it? You'll be the most important part, Kaelin promised. You're the reason we found each other again. The bridge between us. Vesa cleared her throat. While this is touching, there's still the matter of Rathan's co-conspirators. 20 wolves declared loyalty to him tonight. They must be dealt with. The warmth of the moment evaporated, replaced by cold reality. Kalen forced himself to focus, to think like a king instead of a father. Bring them before me, one at a time. I want to hear their reasons, their grievances. Some were true believers in Rathan's cause. Those will face justice. But others were just scared or ambitious or misguided. Those can be rehabilitated. You're showing mercy again, Marin observed. Some would say that's weakness. Some would be wrong, Ilara interjected. Mercy isn't weakness. It's the hardest thing a leader can do, to look at someone who wronged you and choose to see their humanity anyway, to give them a chance at redemption. She looked at Kalen. Your people are watching. Show them what kind of king you really are. So he did. The interrogations lasted through the night and into the gray dawn. Kalen sat in the council chamber, Ilara beside him, where she belonged, and listened to each rebel wolf's story. Some were unrepentant, still insisting Rathan had been right. Those were sentenced to imprisonment, with the possibility of parole after demonstrating genuine reform. But most were ashamed, struggling to articulate fears that Rathan had exploited. Fear of change, fear of the frontier and its wild magic, fear that opening their borders would dilute their culture, their identity. To those wolves, Kalen spoke honestly. I understand your fears, I share some of them. But fear can't be our foundation. If we build our pack on fear of outsiders, on rigid adherence to tradition, regardless of whether it serves us, we'll stagnate, we'll become brittle. And when the next real crisis comes, not a manufactured one, but a genuine threat, we'll shatter. He gestured to Ilara. This woman represents everything you feared. Frontier magic, unconventional bonds, a challenge to the way things have always been. And yet she's also the reason I'm alive, the reason Mira exists, the reason we exposed Rathan's treachery before he could do irreparable damage. If I'd rejected her out of fear, where would we be now? The wolves had no answer for that. By the time the last interrogation concluded, Kalen was exhausted beyond measure. But there was one more task that couldn't wait. He found Rathan in the holding cells beneath the fortress, a stark chamber of cold stone and iron bars. The former beta sat with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. I didn't expect you to come, Rathan said without looking up. I needed to understand. Kalen gripped the bars. You served me for 8 years, fought beside me, saved my life twice. How does someone go from that to orchestrating a coup? Rathan finally met his eyes. Do you know what happened to my grandfather? He was alpha before the Consolidation Wars, strong, feared, respected. But he had one weakness. He loved his human mate more than his duty. When she died giving birth to my father, he fell apart, couldn't lead. The pack fractured and we lost half our territory to rival wolves before my father was old enough to take over. He paused, jaw working. My father learned from that mistake. He was ruthless, practical, never let emotions cloud his judgment, and he built our pack back into something powerful, something to be feared. But then he met your mother, fell desperately in love just like his father before him. And when she was killed in the border skirmishes, he went feral, Kalen finished quietly, led a revenge attack that got half our warriors killed and accomplished nothing except more bloodshed. Exactly. Love made both of them weak, made them fail their people. Rathan's hands clenched. I swore I wouldn't repeat their mistakes. I'd be the strong beta my father should have had, the advisor who kept the king focused on duty instead of desire. And for 8 years, I succeeded. You were a good king, a strong king, rational, strategic, effective. Until I bonded with Ilara. Until you bonded with her, Rathan agreed. And I saw history repeating itself, saw you making the same choices that destroyed my grandfather and father. I wouldn't let it happen again. Better to remove you and take control myself than watch you lead us to ruin. Kalen was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Finally, he said, Your grandfather and father didn't fail because they loved. They failed because they couldn't balance love with duty, because they let grief destroy their judgment. He leaned closer to the bars. I'm not them, Rathan. I can love Ilara and still be an effective king. In fact, the bond makes me better at it. Gives me perspective I didn't have before. Helps me see beyond military strategy and political maneuvering to the actual people I'm supposed to serve. Maybe, Rathan said. Or maybe you're deluding yourself, and in 10 years you'll realize I was right, that love is a liability leaders can't afford. Then I guess we'll find out. Kalen stepped back from the bars. Your trial is in 3 days. Cooperate, and I'll argue for exile instead of execution. Fight me, and I'll let the council decide your fate. Either way, your time as my beta is over. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you were a good beta, once. I wish you'd trusted me enough to voice your concerns instead of turning to treachery. Rathan's laugh was bitter. Would you have listened? Yes, because that's what good leaders do. They listen to dissent even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. You should have given me the chance. He left Rathan sitting in the dark, the weight of wasted loyalty heavy on both their shoulders. The formal bonding ceremony was scheduled for the following week, giving Kalen and Alara time to heal and the pack time to prepare. But the days leading up to it were far from peaceful. There were logistical nightmares to untangle. Rathan's web of corruption had touched every department of the fortress administration. There were diplomatic concerns as word of the coup spread to neighboring packs. There were genuine grievances from frontier settlers who'd suffered under Kalen's policies over the years, grievances that Alara insisted he address. You can't just dismiss their anger, she said during one particularly heated discussion. These are people who've lost homes, lost family members because of raids you ordered or policies you enacted. They deserve acknowledgement, reparations. I was fighting insurgents, Kalen argued, protecting the pack from threats. You were fighting some insurgents, but a lot of innocent people got caught in the crossfire. Like me, like my village. Her voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying you were wrong to fight, but you have to acknowledge that war has consequences beyond the battlefield. So Kalen found himself crafting letters of apology, establishing reparation funds, reaching out to frontier leaders to open dialogues that should have happened years ago. It was humbling work and exhausting and absolutely necessary. And through it all, Alara was beside him, offering perspective, challenging his assumptions, helping him see the world through eyes that had experienced the sharp edge of his policies. She was making him a better king. He'd told Rathan as much, but saying it and living it were different things. You're good at this, he told her one evening as they reviewed settlement proposals. Mira was asleep in the next room, and for once they had a moment of quiet. That paperwork? Alara looked up from the document she'd been annotating. I spent 5 years managing a settlement's medical supplies on virtually no budget. This is actually easier. At leadership, at seeing what needs to be done and doing it, regardless of whether it's comfortable. He set down his own papers. The pack is starting to see it too. Did you notice how many wolves seek you out now? Asking for advice, bringing you their concerns? Alara shifted uncomfortably. They probably just think I have your ear. You do have my ear, but that's not why they come to you. They come because you listen, because you care about solving problems instead of scoring political points, because you're fair. He reached across the table to take her hand. You're going to make an extraordinary queen. I'm not queen yet. The ceremony is still 3 days away. The ceremony is a formality. You've been my queen since the moment you chose to fight beside me instead of running. Alara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I keep waiting for this to feel real, for it to sink in that this is my life now. But it still feels like a dream I'm going to wake up from. It's real, Kalen assured her. Sometimes terrifyingly real, but real. She stood, coming around the table to sit beside him. Can I ask you something? Anything. That night, 5 years ago. Do you remember any of it, beyond what I told you? Kalen closed his eyes, reaching for memories that had always been fragmented, incomplete. But now, with the bond fully open, pieces were starting to surface. I remember fire, rage. The feral madness felt like drowning, like I was being pulled under and couldn't find the surface. He paused, the memories sharpening. Then I heard singing, your voice. It cut through the chaos like a beacon. I followed it, and when I found you, he stopped, the memory crystallizing with startling clarity. You were in the temple, surrounded by wounded. You'd been trying to save them, but the fire was spreading too fast. And you were singing, trying to calm the wolves who'd gone feral, trying to save everyone, even your enemies. His throat tightened. I remember looking at you and seeing someone who refused to give up, who kept fighting even when everything was lost. And something inside me recognized something inside you. Two survivors, refusing to break. The bond formed then, Ilara said softly. Yes, not from desire or even affection, from recognition, from two souls acknowledging each other in the darkness. He opened his eyes to find her watching him intently. I didn't know what was happening, didn't understand why I felt compelled to protect you, to stay close. But my wolf did. He wrapped around you, kept the other feral wolves away. And when you touched my face, sang directly to me, you changed back, Ilara finished. I remember that part. You looked at me with such confusion, such pain, and then I marked you, Kaelin said, his hand moving to her throat where the scar lay hidden beneath her collar. Not violently, almost gently. Like my wolf was claiming you, making sure everyone knew you were under his protection. And you marked me too. I felt your fingernails dig into my throat, felt blood, felt the bond sealing, Ilara breathed. I thought I was imagining it, thought the trauma had made me hallucinate. But I felt it too, like something clicking into place. They sat in silence, processing the recovered memory. Then Ilara said, "What happened after? How did we separate?" The temple collapsed. Part of the roof gave way, and I had to get you out. I carried you to safety, found a place in the forest where you'd be hidden from the remaining wolves, and then, he frowned, the memory fragmenting again. Then nothing. I woke up the next morning back at the base camp with no memory of the night. My commanders told me I'd led a successful operation against insurgent strongholds. The official reports listed no civilian casualties. They lied to you. They lied to me, Kaelin confirmed, anger simmering. I've been reviewing those reports this week. The truth was buried under layers of fabrication. My beta at the time, not Rathan, but his predecessor, deliberately obscured what really happened, made it seem like a clean military victory instead of the massacre it was. Why? Because I'd gone feral. Because that's a shameful thing for an alpha, something that suggests weakness or instability. They covered it up to protect my reputation, and in doing so, they let me believe a lie for 5 years. Ilara's hand tightened on his. I'm sorry. That must have been a relief, actually. Kaelin met her eyes. Because now I know the truth. Now I can make it right. I've already started issuing formal apologies to the frontier settlements, offering reparations. It won't bring back the dead, but it's something. It's more than something. It's accountability. It's choosing to face your mistakes instead of hiding from them. Ilara leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You're a good man, Kaelin. I'm glad I get to see it. They stayed like that for a long moment, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and were slowly building something beautiful from the wreckage. The bonding ceremony was held in the fortress's ancient grove, a sacred space where generations of wolves had celebrated their most important rituals. Trees older than memory formed a natural cathedral, their branches interlocking overhead to create shifting patterns of light and shadow. Ilara wore a gown of deep green silk that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes, eyes that Kaelin couldn't stop staring at. Her hair was unbound, falling in dark waves past her shoulders, and the matching marks on her skin gleamed softly beneath the fabric. She was breathtaking. Mira stood beside her, dressed in miniature finery and looking simultaneously proud and nervous. Kaelin's daughter, their daughter, would play a central role in the ceremony, symbolizing the family they'd created. The entire pack had gathered to witness, hundreds of wolves filling every available space among the trees. But unlike the tense, hostile crowd from a week ago, these faces were open, even welcoming. They'd seen what Ilara and Kaelin could do together. They were ready to accept her. Vesa performed the ritual, her voice strong despite her age. She bound Kaelin and Ilara's hands together with silver cord, then had Mira wrap her small hands around both of theirs. A bond of 3, the old seer intoned, parent to parent, parent to child, a family forged not in comfort but in fire, not in peace but in struggle, and thus stronger than any that came before. She lifted a ceremonial blade. Blood calls to blood. Let the alpha's strength flow through his mate. Let the mate's wisdom guide her alpha. Let the child be protected by both, blessed by both, loved by both. Kalen barely felt the small cut on his palm. His attention was entirely on Alara, on the tears shining in her eyes, on the soft smile that said she was exactly where she wanted to be. When their blood mingled, the bond between them flared so brightly that several wolves gasped. The marks on their skin blazed like captured starlight, visible even to those in the back of the crowd. By the old laws and the new, Vesa proclaimed, I declare this bond witnessed, accepted, and blessed. Kalen, Alpha King, and Alara, healer and mate, are joined. Let no one question it. Let no one challenge it. They are one pack, one purpose, one heart. The crowd erupted in howls, not aggressive, but celebratory. The sound echoed through the grove, carrying up into the sky, announcing to the world that something unprecedented had occurred. A king had chosen a frontier healer. A healer had chosen a king. And together, they would reshape what it meant to lead. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing, wolves in human form mingling with those who preferred their fur. Children ran wild through the grove, including Mira, who'd found a pack of young wolves eager to befriend the new princess. Kalen watched his daughter play, his heart full in a way he hadn't known was possible. She's going to be formidable, Alara said, appearing at his side with 2 cups of honey wine. Just like her mother. And her father. Alara handed him a cup. Speaking of which, Marin told me you've decided to create a new position, Royal Advocate for Frontier Affairs? Someone needs to represent frontier interests at court. Someone who understands the region, the people, the unique challenges. I thought you might have suggestions for candidates. I have one. Me. Kalen nearly spilled his wine. You're going to be queen. You'll have enough responsibilities, which is exactly why I'm perfect for the role. As queen, I'll have the authority to actually make changes, to bridge the gap between the fortress and the frontier, to make sure what happened to my village never happens again. Her expression was fierce. I didn't survive 5 years alone just to become a figurehead, Kalen. Let me do this. Let me make a difference. He should have known. Should have realized that Alara was constitutionally incapable of sitting still while problems existed that she could solve. On one condition, he said, you let me help. This isn't just your project, it's ours. Together. Together, she agreed and sealed it with a kiss that made several nearby wolves whistle appreciatively. Later, as the celebration wound down and wolves began drifting back to their homes, Kalen found himself alone with his new family in their private chambers. Mira had finally crashed from sugar and excitement, curled up in her bed with her wooden horse clutched tight. She's already snoring, Alara said fondly, closing the door to Mira's room. She had a big day. Kalen pulled Alara close, resting his chin on top of her head. We all did. Are you happy? The question was quiet, almost hesitant. Deliriously, terrifyingly, completely. He pulled back to look at her. Are you? I am. Which is strange because a week ago I was ready to hate you forever, and now? Alara smiled, and it transformed her face. Now I think I might actually love you. How's that for character development? Kalen laughed, the sound surprised out of him. Fast work. We've only known each other, 8 days? 9, if you count the night you bled all over my cabin floor. She grew serious. But it feels longer. The bond gives us shortcuts, I think. We know each other's souls, the rest is just details. Important details, though, like your favorite food, your childhood dreams, what makes you laugh. Then we'll learn those things. We have time now. All the time in the world. She traced the mark on his throat, her touch gentle. Thank you. For what? For choosing me back. For seeing past your own grief and trauma to recognize that we could build something together. For being brave enough to change. Her eyes shone. You could have let me die on your cabin floor. Could have sent us away after the bond was revealed. Could have chosen the easy path at any point. But you didn't. There was never really a choice, Kalen said honestly. From the moment I woke up and saw you standing over me, bloody and defiant and absolutely magnificent, I was yours. I just didn't know it yet. They kissed then, slow and deep, a promise of the life they'd build together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elara rested her forehead against his. I should probably tell you, I have no idea how to be a queen. I'm going to make mistakes, probably spectacularly. Good thing you're bonded to someone who's also making it up as he goes. Kaelin grinned. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. Together, Elara echoed, and it sounded like a prayer, like a vow, like the beginning of something extraordinary. But 3 months later, the first emissaries from the frontier settlements arrived at the fortress. They came wary and suspicious, expecting political platitudes and empty promises. What they found instead was a queen who spoke their language, who understood their struggles, who'd lived the same hardships they faced every day. Elara negotiated trade agreements that actually favored frontier communities. She established medical outposts staffed by fortress healers working alongside frontier herbalists. She created scholarship programs so frontier children could receive education at the fortress without being forced to abandon their culture. And Kaelin backed her every step, using his authority as king to push through reforms that 3 months ago would have been unthinkable. The pack grumbled sometimes. Change always inspired resistance. But they couldn't argue with results. The frontier rebellions that had plagued the kingdom for decades began to subside. Trade increased, the fortress's coffers filled with new revenue from formerly hostile territories. Elara was making them prosperous, and prosperity was hard to argue with. Mira thrived too, growing into her power under the careful guidance of Vesa and other elder wolves. She was still gentle, still compassionate, still wanted to heal wounded birds and befriend every stray animal that wandered into the fortress. But now there was steel beneath the softness, a strength that promised she'd be a force to reckon with when she came of age. She asked me this morning if she could learn frontier magic, Elara mentioned one evening as they prepared for bed. The old songs, the herb lore, all of it. What did you tell her? That I'd teach her everything I know, that her power comes from both sides of her heritage, and she shouldn't reject either one. Elara paused. Was that okay? I should have asked you first. It was perfect, Kaelin interrupted. She is both frontier and fortress, human and wolf, healer and warrior. The more she understands all those parts of herself, the stronger she'll be. He pulled Elara close, marveling as he did every night at the fact that she was here, that she'd chosen this, that they'd built something real from the ashes of trauma and loss. Through the bond, he felt her contentment, felt her happiness tinged with lingering grief for what she'd lost, but no longer consumed by it. She was healing, just as he was. Together. I love you, he said, because he could now, because they'd earned those words through fire and blood and choice. I love you too, Elara replied, and kissed him like she meant to prove it. Outside their window, the fortress glowed with lamplight, wolves moving through the courtyards and corridors, going about their lives. A pack that had been fractured was knitting back together. A kingdom that had been at war with itself was finding peace. And at the center of it all, a king and queen who'd been forged in chaos, bound by fate, and united by choice. It wasn't the ending either of them had expected. It was so much better. Years later, when Mira stood before the pack as a young woman preparing to take on her own responsibilities as heir, she would tell the story of her parents' bonding. She would describe the night her mother saved the king's life, the bond that formed in fire and blood, the choice they made to build something beautiful from terrible circumstances. They could have let hatred win, she would say, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd inherited the best parts of both parents. They could have let trauma define them, but they chose differently, chose mercy over vengeance, chose love over fear, chose to believe that broken things could be made whole. And the young wolves listening would understand that they were hearing more than a story. They were hearing the foundation of everything their pack had become, a place where frontier and fortress merged, where healing was valued as much as strength, where different didn't mean dangerous. They were hearing about the moment everything changed, about a healer who refused to let anyone die on her watch, even her worst enemy, about a king who learned that true strength meant being vulnerable enough to accept help, about a bond that shouldn't have existed but became the most powerful force in the kingdom, about a family forged in fire, tempered by struggle, and made unbreakable by love. That was the story. That was the truth. That was the legacy Alara and Kaelin built, one choice at a time, together. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.